Good evening, I'm Dan Matheson. You are watching CTV Newsnet. We are delighted you are with us. It is time now for CTV News. Here is Lloyd Robertson.
Tonight, more than 1 million people turn London into a sea of support for the Queen. A spectacular climax to the Golden Jubilee Party. Jean Chrétien's defiance.
They won't need to vote on Thursday night to have an election.
The PM's dare to his party. And why these mice might give athletes a new way to cheat.
CTV News with Lloyd Robertson.
Good evening. The color, the crowds, the joyous celebration of the finale of the Queen's four-day Golden Jubilee spectacle is over tonight. The world watched as a wave of affection rolled across London to mark the Queen's 50th year on the throne. The scene was something we won't soon forget. 1 million people in the streets, glorious music and pageantry, a solemn service of thanksgiving, and those cheers, spontaneous, thunderous, and enthusiastic. The Queen was clearly moved on several occasions and got right into the spirit of the event. CTV's London correspondent Tom Kennedy was there to see it all. Tom?
Lloyd, just a few hours ago, these streets were packed with more than 1 million people. What a party it was. Even centuries ago, it would not have looked much different. Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip rode through London in a coach built in the 18th century. A nation celebrated its Queen's 50th anniversary as monarch. St. Paul's Cathedral for a memorial service, and then to a luncheon organized by the City of London. The Queen said she has been deeply moved by the enormous crowd celebrating with her, particularly now, as this football-mad nation is more than a little distracted by the World Cup tournament being played in Asia.
I am more than conscious at the moment of the importance of football. Gratitude, respect and pride. These words sum up how I feel about the people of this country and the Commonwealth, and what this Golden Jubilee means to me.
And outside the grand finale, 20,000 marchers, 1 million people lining the streets watching. This is the new face of Britain that the Queen's ancestors might have had trouble recognizing. But through all the changes, the monarchy has endured. In 1935, after his silver jubilee, King George V said he never thought the people of this nation cared so much. 67 years later, his granddaughter, the Queen, her family, and perhaps even the nation itself, can share the same sense of wonder. And so it ended. When the royal family began planning the Jubilee celebrations, they wondered whether Britons would actually take part. As it is, there were 4 days unlike any in the nation's memory. Lloyd.
Tom, clearly Buckingham Palace was reaching out today to underline the point that the royal family is a unifying force in Britain.
Well, I think the royal family set out to try to portray the Queen as a symbol of national unity, a promoter of multiculturalism, a monarch in touch with her people. And in the understated language of Buckingham Palace tonight, a spokesperson said royal expectations were exceeded.
Thank you, Tom. CTV's Tom Kennedy in London. Well, London may have held the biggest bash, but it certainly wasn't the only Jubilee celebration. In Ottawa, a more subdued gathering, as the British High Commissioner, Sir Andrew Burns, hosted a tea party. Guests at Earnscliffe toasted the Queen and signed a book of best wishes. From the sublime to the silly, in Afghanistan, British troops celebrated with a barbecue and some light-hearted games. 1,400 British troops are currently serving in Afghanistan. And they were in the tiniest of minorities, but about 40 anti-monarchists protested the Jubilee in a London pub. Police received a tip they were planning to disrupt the festivities and didn't give them the chance. And a reminder that the Queen will be coming to Canada in October to celebrate the Golden Jubilee. To politics now, and an important appointment for Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. He faces his Liberal caucus tomorrow for the first time since the ouster of Finance Minister Paul Martin. And when the doors close, the gloves may well come off. Knowing that, the Prime Minister went on the offensive today. He reminded Rebel MPs that the price of party disloyalty could be electoral defeat. With more on Chrétien's counter-campaign, CTV's Roger Smith.
Jean Chrétien had a blunt warning for caucus critics. Liberal infighting won't bring Paul Martin to power. It will only help the alliance.
If they destroy the Liberal Party, the alternative is Harper.
And he threatened their seats could be on the line soon if they try to topple the government in protest in a confidence vote Thursday.
The election is not for tomorrow, unless that they want to have an early election. You know, they have only to vote on Thursday night to have an election.
But Martin backers insist they have no plans to oppose the money bill, which flows from Martin's last budget. In fact, the former finance minister will take his new seat here for the first time to vote with the government. His supporters accuse Chrétien of provocation.
This type of thing, of going and accusing people and trying to find scarecrows and boogeymen, is simply unacceptable. This is the very thing that is dividing the party.
He's swaggering around like a schoolyard bully. Now he's bullying his caucus, he's bullying his cabinet. I mean, his behavior is just despicable.
Chrétien also seems to be trying to lower the bar for the leadership review.
With a vote of 90.19%.
Last time he got 90% approval, but with next February's vote shaping up as a showdown with Martin forces, the Prime Minister suggested he'd be able to survive with the numbers he got when he first won the leadership.
I want to see the campaign, you know, it's a vote. It's like a leadership convention. The last time I won with 58% of the vote on the first ballot.
All this setting the stage for a difficult caucus meeting in the morning.
I think we want a full explanation as to how this happened, how we ended up without a very, very popular finance minister in the government.
Well, Martin won't be in caucus. His supporters will be, with plans to give Chrétien an earful. The Prime Minister is hoping to calm things down, but his tough talk and threats may make that job more difficult. Lloyd?
Roger, what are the chances the Chrétien people might try to cancel that leadership review for February?
Well, the Prime Minister confirmed today he'll make no efforts to stop or delay the review. One advisor said it's cast in stone. Yet at the same time, he keeps talking about the big mandate he won in the last election, as if that's a factor that would have to be considered along with the leadership review results. It's as if he's laying groundwork to give himself a bit of leeway should the results fall in that gray zone where it's open to interpretation whether the party wants him to stay or go.
Thank you, Roger.
Good night, Lloyd.
Along with the nagging doubts about Paul Martin's departure, there were questions today about his replacement, John Manley, who holds several key portfolios, including Deputy Prime Minister. When the opposition asked if Manley was overloaded, it sparked this light-hearted exchange.
Which of these jobs is he going to do part-time, or does he expect a salary for each one of them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I quit my job at Tim Hortons. So.
When he will be too busy. And he just told me that he has a part-time job with Tim Hortons on Saturday. So, but if he has a little bit too much, you know, I will become his assistant.
And I just wonder if this isn't a new mechanism to keep another leadership rival so busy that he'll hardly be able to breathe.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It'll work.
I never thought about it, but it's a good idea.
Some light moments in the House today. The Bank of Canada hit the fiscal brakes today, hoping to slow down an accelerating economy. Worried that too much growth too soon could trigger an inflationary spiral, the central bank raised its key rate again. It's the second increase in less than 2 months, and it bumps the bank's key overnight rate by a quarter point to 2.5%. Within hours, the big banks responded, hiking their prime lending rates from 4 to 4.25. Just months ago, the Bank of Canada was cutting interest rates to stimulate spending, and spending is exactly what consumers have been doing. So much so, the bank is now looking to curb the buying binge. With more on the new economic game plan, our business and technology reporter, David Aiken.
So your total is $132.25.
It's big news in Ottawa, but at the country's shopping malls where consumers are still spending money, the Martin Chrétien flap has hardly caused a ripple.
Oh, with all the changes in the cabinet shuffle? I'm not terribly concerned. I just do my shopping. I don't really care what happens.
People are still buying. The malls are still busy.
Things are starting to pick up, actually. I know the housing market's really going up, and it's very difficult for people trying to buy a house because the prices are going up every day.
In fact, building permits for homes hit an all-time high in April. That's not all. Sales of new cars and trucks in Canada this year could be the best in a decade. All of which means the story of Canada's economic success is the story of the Canadian consumer.
It is, and I mean that's what the underlying factor is supporting the Canadian economy, is that consumers have kept their wallets open.
But with the latest inflation rate at 2.2%, the bank is worried that too much spending will overheat the economy. In a statement, the bank said it will take the action necessary to keep inflation at its 2% target over the medium term.
There's the perception that the Bank of Canada is acting responsibly, and it's also sort of proof that the Canadian economy is actually rebounding.
The world's central bankers, meeting in Montreal today, like an economy that's neither too cold nor too hot. But the latest numbers show Canada's economy growing at 6% a year, and that's much too hot for the bank.
So if they want to keep inflation at sort of the midpoint of their 1 to 3% target band, that means they have to move interest rates up quite significantly in the months ahead.
And that means by this time next year, most consumers can expect to pay 2 full percentage points more for their loans. But experts also say that with Canada's economy performing so well, those interest rate hikes are unlikely to stop growth or keep shoppers away from the malls. David Aiken, CTV News, Toronto.
Roman Catholic leaders have a plan they hope will end the sex abuse scandal rocking the church. Zero tolerance for pedophile priests, but critics still are not satisfied. We'll tell you why next. And later, more on the Queen's Jubilee, still to come on CTV News.
Back to Lloyd Robertson in just a moment. First, a look at some of the other stories we are following. A lower U.S. dollar and persistent doubts about the ethics of big business in America combined to put a damper on the markets today. The TSX Composite shed 31, the Dow slipped 21, and the Canadian dollar also sunk 16 ticks to close at 65.31 cents U.S. This despite a quarter-point hike in the Bank of Canada's prime rate today. Aviation pioneer Ken Patrick, who built the firm that became a world leader in flight simulators, has died in Victoria. Family sources say the 86-year-old founder of CAE fought a long battle with Alzheimer's. The firm he launched near Montreal in 1947 now has 6,000 employees around the world. And it's been a major league day for Canadian baseball. Two of the country's best left-handed pitchers, both are from BC, by the way, were among the top 10 picks in the Major League Amateur Draft. Adam Lowen of Surrey went 4th to Baltimore. The Colorado Rockies took Jeff Francis. He's from the Vancouver area, 9th overall. And one of the stars of Friends, Jennifer Aniston, is going to have her day in court against a magazine that ran a topless photograph of her. Aniston's suit says a stalkerazzi with a telephoto lens scaled a wall to sneak shots of her tanning in her own backyard. The trial in LA will start early next month. Weather picture for tomorrow: cloudy with sunny breaks for BC and the prairies. Morning showers, clearing later in the day for both Ontario and Quebec. Cloudy and wet in the Maritimes, but sunny in Newfoundland and Labrador. Back to CTV News with Lloyd Robertson right after the break.
By the time you see these images, some of these children may not be alive. Their world is dangerous and uncertain. A world of hunger, sickness, and pain. They say it takes a village to raise a child. But what happens when that village has no clean water or food? What happens when the people of that village struggle every day to overcome sickness, hunger, and poverty? Please call the Christian Children's Fund of Canada and learn how you can help a child now. For less than $1 a day, you can give a child food, life-saving medical care, the chance to go to school, the freedom to look forward to the future. Please call now and sponsor a child, because it takes more than a village to raise a child. It takes you.
Even though Jeep Grand Cherokee is more refined and civilized than ever, rest assured, it still hasn't lost its animal instincts.
America's Catholic bishops are tackling the crisis of confidence in the church, trying to restore faith in an institution racked by allegations of child abuse and cover-ups. Today, they issued a draft report to deal with past transgressions and future temptations. Among the proposals, all new abuse allegations must be reported to police. Any clergy who abuses a child from now on would be defrocked. But the plan is not so tough on sins of the past. It would allow some members of the clergy to retain rank if they'd committed only one offense before. Some victims of abuse see that proposal as a kind of loophole for offenders. They want the policy of zero tolerance to apply to the past as well as to the future. CTV's Rosemary Thompson has more.
They were summoned to Rome. Now the American cardinals are acting on what Pope John Paul II told them, that there is no place in the priesthood for those who would abuse the young. In a draft report, the American Conference of Bishops is calling for zero tolerance in the future.
From this day forward, anyone who offends will be out of the priesthood, again responding to the call of our Holy Father.
But the one strike, you're out policy doesn't apply to past cases. If a priest was involved in a one-time case of abuse, he could still hold on to his position.
Past offenders who were not pedophiles classified as pedophiles with one offense, that would go before a review board.
That angers victims like Mark Serrano. He was 8 years old, an altar boy when his parish priest began sexually abusing him. It continued over 5 years.
How hard is this? You sexually terrorize a child or a vulnerable person once, boom, you should be out of the priesthood. You shouldn't carry the title father. You shouldn't be able to administer the sacraments.
Teachers convicted of one case of sexual abuse are fired. Serrano wonders why priests in a similar position of trust should be treated differently.
It's wrong. And, you know, decent people everywhere know it's wrong.
What the draft report doesn't deal with is the systematic cover-up. Bishops routinely transferred problem priests from one parish to another, and victims say the hierarchy is as responsible as the priests accused of abuse. Rosemary Thompson, CTV News, Washington.
And one more note on this story. This plan is only a draft document. Later this month, bishops from all across the United States will gather in Dallas to vote on whether to endorse it and then submit it to the Pope. In other news tonight, hours after the Ontario government introduced a bill to fire them, the board of directors at Hydro One quit. The resignations from the executives who oversee the province's electricity grid came amid a growing controversy over hefty compensation packages for senior managers. This surveillance video was unveiled today at the Montreal trial of 17 Hells Angels accused of conspiring to kill their rivals. The bikers are seen counting money. Police say they also took time to organize a Christmas charity. And it was an historic day for Canadian baseball. Adam Lowen of Surrey, BC, became the earliest Canadian selection ever in the Major League Draft. The pitcher was picked 4th overall by the Baltimore Orioles. And another Canadian pitcher, Jeff Francis of North Delta, BC, went 9th overall to the Colorado Rockies. Medical research aimed at helping people with a crippling disease could have unintended consequences in the world of sport. Will these mice help athletes beat anti-doping tests? Coming up on CTV News. Our late local news preview comes next.
Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to cordially invite you
to enjoy the pleasures of Britain.
Savor a cup of tea.
Visit a historic house.
Have a spot of lunch at the King's Head. We could meet up in Trafalgar Square. Take a walk in the country. Or indulge yourself in our sporting traditions. To find great offers, go to britain2002.ca for offers you may never see again. Do come.
It's happy hour at JetsGo, the new and true discount airline. 2-for-1 seat sale. Get it? So JetsGo and simply fly. BoardJetsGo.net.
Even though Jeep Grand Cherokee is more refined and civilized than ever, rest assured, it still hasn't lost its animal instincts.
At Michelin, our tires are rigorously tested. They're laser checked, x-rayed for structural integrity. And finally, no tire leaves the factory without a thorough hand inspection. Michelin, because so much is riding on your tires.
Closed captioning of this program is brought to you in part by M&M Meat Shops. Hundreds of entertaining ideas all in one aisle. Drop by today.
In medical news tonight, a Canadian study examining health in newborns found babies do just as well with home visits by a nurse as they do if taken to a clinic. McGill University researchers looked into the health care available for newborns, given the short stays mothers now have in hospital. Over the past 20 years, the average stay has been reduced from 4 days to about 2. The World Anti-Doping Agency officially opened its new headquarters in Montreal tonight. Its mission is to promote and regulate fair play in amateur athletics. But as the science to catch cheaters improves, so do the methods used by the cheaters. As CTV's Aphrodite Salas tells us, there are growing fears that those willing to do anything to win will turn to gene therapy.
All his life, Yarrick Kulesa has nurtured an Olympic dream. Thousands of hours of practice and competition.
I train with honest people and I compete, I hope, with honest people.
It may soon become a lot harder to test that honesty. These mice have fueled fear of gene doping. Their muscles, injected with growth hormones, bulked up fast and stayed stronger for longer. The research is meant to help fight diseases like muscular dystrophy. About 500 humans are now in clinical trials. But the potential for sinister use is one of the biggest concerns for the World Anti-Doping Agency.
There have been inquiries by people supporting athletes who say, even though this stuff hasn't been fully scientifically tested, even though it's not been approved, even though it's not on the market, is there some way we can get it?
Christiane Ayotte is director of an IOC drug testing lab. She says gene doping may become too tempting to resist.
The pressure being put on the athlete to follow the trend would be enormous.
If athletes do get access to gene doping, the hardest challenge may be to test for it.
So far, scientists say the only way to detect gene manipulation is with muscle biopsies and DNA tests, expensive, invasive procedures that are not yet practical for widespread screening.
The solution may be to focus on prevention while it's still early.
We've got to perhaps begin to regulate the doctors and scientists who are allowed to involve themselves with athletes' care and athletes' training.
In the meantime, Yarrick Kulesa would prefer not to think about running against genetically altered competitors.
Because if we do think about those things, then we're not concentrating on the right thing.
If only all athletes could say the same. Aphrodite Salas, CTV News, Montreal.
As a goaltender for the Detroit Red Wings, Dominik Hasek has stopped his share of speeding shots. But today, Hasek, nicknamed the Dominator, was himself stopped, pulled over for speeding.
That's the Red Wings goalie, man. Let him go. Please.
That's him in the SUV. A TV crew just happened to be at the intersection to catch the action. As the police officer handed Hasek the ticket, bystanders let out a rousing cheer. With that, Hasek headed for a team practice before tonight's first game of the Stanley Cup Final against the Carolina Hurricanes. When we return, the age of Elizabeth. Her 50th year on the throne and counting. How long will the Queen reign?
We'll get back to Lloyd Robertson and the rest of CTV News in a moment. First, a quick recap of the stories we're following.
Unless that they want to have an early election, you know, they have only to vote on Thursday night to have an election.
Prime Minister Jean Chrétien is daring disgruntled Liberal MPs who want to get rid of him to vote against a key government money bill on Thursday. He would then call a snap federal election. Asked to speculate about an India-Pakistan military confrontation, Pakistan's President, General Pervez Musharraf, refused to promise he would only use nuclear weapons if he were attacked first by nuclear weapons. He is attending an Asian security conference in Kazakhstan. Congress wants to know if there were colossal intelligence failures prior to September the 11th. High-stakes hearings are underway in Washington looking into the CIA and the FBI. Congress wants to know what they knew and when. Canadians will be paying a bit more for loans tomorrow. The central bank raised its key rate a quarter point. It is now 2.5%. The chartered banks matched the increase to send their prime up to 4.25%. Actor Kevin Costner is in Calgary. He's making his next movie, but hopes he will get time to cast a line as well. Apparently, as much as he loves movies, and this one's a Western called Open Range, his real passion is fly fishing. Wednesday's weather picture looks like this. Cloudy with sunny breaks for BC and the prairies. It is still dry. Morning showers clearing later in Ontario and Quebec. Cloudy and wet throughout the day in the Maritimes. Mainly sunny in Labrador and Newfoundland. I'm Dan Matheson, back with more of Lloyd Robertson right after this.
Even though Jeep Grand Cherokee is more refined and civilized than ever, rest assured, it still hasn't lost its animal instincts.
Jerry and I had just finished a messy engine job when we decided to clean up the garage floor. It was awful. Years of grease, tar, oil, and grime. So Jerry gets out the grease magnet and I pour it on. We let it sit a bit and I give it a good scrub with a stiff brush. I couldn't believe it. The results were amazing. So I get the bright idea to take Grease Magnet home and clean my driveway. It worked even faster. My wife Jean was so impressed, she decides to tackle the greasy barbecue grill. It looked like new when she was through.
Grease Magnet cleans all kinds of other things. Grimy concrete and asphalt, greasy granite floors, terrazzo and other stone walkways, even pool decks.
I should have never let her read the label.
Grease Magnet, great for grease and tar, from CLR.
At participating Canadian Tire, Home Hardware, Walmart.
So before we close your mortgage, there's just a couple of additional costs that need to be added on.
Okay.
What? Did you run out of ribbon? Actually, yes.
Don't be caught off guard. Ask about the Scotia Cut Your Closing Costs mortgage, only at Scotiabank.
And finally for us tonight, there was no question today about the love of the British people for Queen Elizabeth II. If anything, this Jubilee Day in London seemed to confirm the magic is still there. Una Mary Parker is a royal biographer who has been covering royalty in Britain for many years. Ms. Parker, what does today tell us about the state of the monarchy in Britain?
I think that it's very, very strong and very healthy and is here to stay. Even the Queen has been amazed by the outpouring of affection towards her. It's been a tremendous success. There hasn't been a single hitch. And she herself has spoken in much more an intimate way than she normally does, especially at her lunch at the Guildhall today, when she didn't only thank her husband for being so supportive, but also Prince Charles and her children, who had been particularly supportive during the last very sad few weeks that she's had. It's been an amazing spectacle that has shown us a whole new way of royalty, a whole new way of carnival mixed with solemnity, and I think we should be very happy with the way it's all gone.
The Queen could even look forward to a Diamond Jubilee. That's only another 10 years for her after all. What might Prince Charles do in the meantime?